Before we kick off Season 3, I want to tell you about Your CBD Store in Columbia, Tennessee. Your CBD Store provides only the highest quality CBD products in a spa-like atmosphere where you can also learn about how CBD can impact your life. At Your CBD Store, it's their heart to educate consumers about their products and their benefits. Do the research. CBD is proven to provide relief for anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, PTSD, and much more. From hemp oil and topical creams to edibles and skincare products, Your CBD Store Columbia wants you to get back to being you. They even have products for pets. Your CBD Store is located at 1506 Nashville Highway in Columbia, Tennessee, or you can find them on the web at yourcbdtn.com.
Welcome to the 99% Loco Podcast.
Hey there, podcast family, and welcome back to Season 3 of the podcast. I have to tell you, it feels like it's been forever, or we went through some kind of pandemic. I guess you could say we're still in it. I took a couple months off anyway, enjoyed some more intentional time with the family. I also took some time to plan what's to come on this podcast, and I'm looking forward to bringing you a bunch of new guests and their stories. I took some time to freshen up the podcast website a bit too, so if you haven't been there to take a look, you can check it out at 99percentlocalpod.com. One cool feature I'm excited about is that if you listen to the episodes directly on the website, you have the ability to leave comments. If you're new to this podcast, each week I'm bringing stories of Nashville and Middle Tennessee-based entrepreneurs, business owners, organizations, musicians, authors, and other creators. We don't just talk about the boring stuff of what happens between 9 and 5. Everybody has a story, their own unique upbringing, and a passion for why they're doing what they're doing. I personally love the sense of community around Nashville and get my kicks from sharing these stories. This week's guest is Sean Giovanni. Sean is a sonic storyteller who's passionate about helping artists achieve their unique creative vision. He achieves this mission as a record producer, audio engineer, project manager, educator, and the owner of The Record Shop, a recording studio and multimedia production company in Nashville. Sean works in a wide range of genres and has had the privilege to work with artists ranging from John Legend and Juicy J to Big and Rich and Tim McGraw to Zakk Wylde and the Wallflowers. He is also the co-owner of a music industry-focused mindset development platform called Mind Map, which is intended to help creatives achieve artistic prosperity through mental conditioning and emotional fitness. Sean believes in using his life to create art that will outlast him and is passionate about helping others achieve that same fulfillment. So let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Sean Giovanni from the Record Shop Nashville. I saw you describe yourself as a sonic storyteller. So in a short few statements, can you tell me what that means to you?
Through some feedback that I got from people that I worked with, I started to recognize what my specialty might be as a producer, surrounded by my philosophy. And what I heard from a lot of people was that they felt like I was able to bring the story out of their lyrics and their song through sound. And as I started to analyze that, I started to recognize reasons why. And I found that that was a more intuitive way of describing what I do, as opposed to just saying I'm a producer, but what it is that is specific about my approach. And a lot of that comes from my ideas about how to take a song as its bare bones, chords and a melody, and then think about the instrumentation, the sonic production stuff that we do, the dynamics of the arrangement that are able to create a scene throughout the different sections of the song to create a sonic visual of what's happening in the song. And that's where that idea stemmed from.
We're going to unpack that a little bit more. But so I like to ask this question. So where in Nashville area are you sitting today? Are you actually at your studio?
Yes. Yeah, I'm at my studio today.
And where's that actually at in Nashville?
It's just south of downtown.
Getting to where you are today, your motivation, I know you're a very passionate person. You have a very entrepreneurial mindset, and that's all a big part of your story. But part of my podcast is origin stories. So I kind of want to take it way back and talk a little bit about your background. And this interview may be a little bit different than you're used to, because I know you do a lot of, NAMM interviews and tech interviews. We might not nerd out that much, but can we just dig in? Can you tell me a little bit about your life and your background and, where you're originally from and grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan, a town called Farmington. And when I think back to the things that started to really inspire me around music, my first memory was in elementary school. I was really fortunate to have music be a part of the curriculum when I was a kid. And we actually had a music class. It wasn't an elective, it was part of our education. And in that class, we learned about basic music theory, we learned about rhythm, we learned about basic, notation. And we did a lot of critical listening to music to learn what different orchestral instruments sound like, what different acoustic instruments sounded like. And I remember this specific exercise that the teacher did, and I might have been in like first grade, but it really stuck with me. They had us listen through old orchestra recordings that were used way back in the day to tell a story before we had, like movies and stuff. And we would go through this exercise where a specific instrument would play, and then it would be making a sound, like maybe a horse, galloping, or the feeling of a busy street or people moving. And the teacher would give us the idea of what the composer's intention was and the story that they were trying to tell, and then we'd have to pick out what the instruments were. And it didn't mean a whole lot back then, except I just thought it was a fun exercise. But looking back on it, it was a great foundation for my thought process as a producer to think about how sounds are intertwined to create an experience in music.
Yeah, you're lucky to get to experience that at that young of age, because I don't remember anything like that in elementary and grade school.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important. And there's a lot of great programs and organizations that provide after school opportunities to put music into people's lives. But it's unfortunate that in many cases, those type of programs have been pulled out of just general, public school.
Moving on from there, did you just continue learning, about music and recording eventually on your own?
Yeah, the next experience that I had with music that really got me into the creative side of it was around the same age. I was in first grade, and the school that I went to had a competition that they offered to students. It was an arts competition called the Reflections competition. And they gave us a topic. The topic was don't do drugs. And the options were that you could paint a picture, you could write a story, you could write a poem, or you could record a song. And I thought it would be really fun to record a song. So I wrote a drug-free rap song, and I recorded it with this little like boombox beat machine thing that had like a programmed beat in it, and you could hold it down and it would play the beat, and then you could record yourself into this microphone that was connected to it on a little cassette tape. And so I wrote the song down and did my recording and turned it in, and I ended up winning the school thing, and then went on to like the city and then the state competition. It was really cool, and it was my first experience of being kind of wanting to dive in, like making a choice to dive into music when given a few different options,
Right.
And also my first time where I was recognized for creating something, and that felt really cool. And exciting. So that's kind of it's my first award, and I have it sitting in my my lounge in the studio still. And it definitely gives me a lot of perspective, looking back, like, where you came from.
Yeah. And I'm sure that at that point, it kind of motivated you to like, oh, well, that kind of, got me a little recognition. Maybe I can keep doing this and see where it goes.
Absolutely. One of the things that I when I look back on it that I learned out of it was how music can connect people and kind of bridge gaps between people, which I think is really powerful. And I experience that now. I work with artists all over the world, and there's many songs that I work on where I don't understand the native language, but I understand the melody and their emotion and their intention. And it's a lot of fun to work with artists from Africa and Russia and all kinds of, and the UK and all kinds of different areas, and see how music connects together. But that experience for me back then, I had big red curly hair. I was a bit taller than most of the other kids. And I wouldn't say that I got bullied by any means, but I definitely wasn't part of like the cool crowd. And when I won that award, when we were leaving the assembly, all of a sudden, like some of the kids that I had, kind of wanted to be in the crowd of were now like walking next to me and like, oh man, let me see the award and stuff. And how I look at that is not necessarily the idea that just getting, an award or a physical recognition for something is what provides value or fulfillment with music, because I've learned that it doesn't. But what I did recognize was how it could break down those gaps and connect people together in a way where they didn't see a connection before. And now they saw something unique about me that they thought was interesting, in that way. And while that only, lasted for a certain period of time, which is why awards aren't a source of fulfillment, it did give me the viewpoint, I guess, looking back on it, is the way that music can bring people together.
So moving forward, did you go to college or any additional training for recording and producing?
I did. When I got to middle school, I was learning guitar. My sister was taking piano lessons, so I would kind of noodle on her little keyboard that she had. And I was getting into music. I was big into sports too, so I hadn't totally dove 100% in. But then I think around sixth grade, I saw DJ Scribble on MTV Spring Break, and he was on this beach rocking two turntables and having this crazy party. And I was like, man, I want to do that. That looks awesome. So that summer, I saved up some money from cutting lawns and invested in a couple turntables and a mixer and some records, and a course from Berklee College of Music that was a course in the musicality of turntablism. And it was just a booklet with a couple vinyl records, and they taught you how to scratch records and match beats from a musical theory perspective, which was really interesting to me. So I got really into that, and that's what got me more into just listening to music and seeing how songs could intertwine together. And I got a little 4-track cassette recorder, set up a little makeshift studio in my parents' basement, and just started exploring recording. And that continued on through high school. I recorded a bunch of friends, like bands and singer-songwriters. I made some of my own music, sold CDs at school, and started to get into the entrepreneur side of things. And I also had a DJ company. So those are some of my first kind of business things that had to do with music. Then as I was getting ready to graduate from high school and look at college, I was really not interested anymore in going to a 4-year university and spending a bunch of time learning a bunch of things that I didn't see at that time were going to apply to what my vision for my life was going to be. And that was a challenge to work with between my parents and what their expectation of education and a career path is, and what my vision was for my career. And we ended up settling on the idea of me going to a trade school. So at least I would get a degree, but I would only have to spend about a year and a half in school, and then I could begin my career. So I found a small school in Minneapolis that I went to after high school, and that was where I first started to learn Pro Tools and digital recording, as well as having access to large format consoles and all kinds of different analog outboard gear and every microphone imaginable. And the school did a great job of providing a number of different studios that gave students access to stuff. So when I was in school, I went to class, and then after class was over, the studios were available for the students to book out. And I just stayed at school and slept on the couch, and then got up and went back. I would stay there a few days at a time. There was a little shower that I found in one of the buildings, and I just packed enough stuff to stay there for a few days. And I don't know if they ever knew that I never left, but I just gotten this routine of staying there for 3 or 4 days at a time, and then going back home, getting some more stuff, and then doing it again. And in that period of time, it allowed me to really immerse myself into all the different types of equipment and get a lot of experience and just running sound through all different things and figuring out why they sound the way they do and what this button does and what this button does. And I just went around Minneapolis and found anybody that I could put a microphone in front of and brought them in and recorded them, and just to get a lot of experience.
So how long after that did you make to move to Nashville? And I'd ask why Nashville, but I think we all know that.
Yeah, well, there was definitely a couple options, but I moved to Nashville the day before I graduated. I had ended up finding a lease on a place, and I found a potential job, or what I thought was going to be a job at the time. And I didn't even go to the ceremony. I finished my last day of class. I packed everything up. It was the end of the month, and I was going to have to wait another week if I wanted to go get my certificate and stuff. So I said, just mail it to me. I'm going to get out of here and head to Nashville. But the decision about moving to Nashville came out of making a visit there, talking to a lot of people, doing some interviews for potential internships, and just learning about the community. And what I saw was a small town with big city opportunity. Everything that you needed was there. I love the idea that it was a town based around songwriting and a town that was known for production, that they had some of the best musicians in the world, that there was a really great, I felt like it was a really great community to be able to dive into. It was also the least expensive of what I considered the three options to be, which was Nashville, LA, or New York. And so I think the combination of all those things is what really led me to make the move there. So I moved to Nashville when I was 20, the day after my last day of school. And I moved here for a job at a major studio. And there's was at that time a regulation in Tennessee about having to get college credit to take on an internship. So I found this opportunity after getting turned down by a bunch of internships because the school that I went to didn't offer an internship program. And this specific studio didn't ask about that, but they said that there was a potential opportunity for an assistant engineer position. You just have to come in and work as an intern for maybe a month or two and get the lay of the land. And if you don't screw anything up and do a good job based on your experience, the studio manager felt pretty confident that I could get a gig as a part-time assistant. So I moved down and showed up the first day, and the first thing that he asked me for was the internship paperwork from my college. And my heart sank. I was like, well, I explained to him that that we didn't have that, and he went back to corporate because the studio was owned by a large record label, and they weren't able to work something out for me. So I was here in Nashville, or finally kind of thought that I found my first foot in the door to get in, and all of that kind of fell apart, unfortunately. The great thing that came out of that was that studio manager became a really great mentor of mine, and he was always willing to take a phone call, go to lunch, have me come by and show him some stuff that I was working on. And he really gave me, he said, man, even though this I'm really sad that I can't help you with this, and that it's not going to work out, but you packed up your stuff, you moved here, you made the commitment, you've been working hard since you were a kid, you know what you want to do. Now it's just time for you to get out and start meeting people and expand your relationships here in town. And he felt confident that it at some point it would work out, and that I'd find another opportunity. And so that's what led me to start a career as a freelance engineer, producer, and then what eventually led to me wanting to formulate my own business as opposed to relying on finding employment somewhere else.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about the record shop. Since I was, looking into having you come on here, I've been reading about a lot of what you're doing. Can you kind of just walk me through how that came about and what made you decide to, start up your own business with the record shop?
Absolutely. Well, it came out of a lot of research about the music business and where the industry was at, where the recording industry was at specifically. It also came out of necessity. I had basically knocked down the door of every studio in town, tried to connect with any producer and for an opportunity to get an internship or an apprenticeship or an assistant, position. And there just weren't the opportunities at the time. And I started to recognize that if I was going to be able to continue to live there, I needed to figure out a way to start to generate income from this skill set that I had built. And in reading a lot of books about business and careers and stuff, I started to get excited about the idea of working for myself. And I'd had some experience doing that already as a kid with a DJ business and a landscaping business and selling CDs at high school. And that was all really exciting to me. So I dove in at first just really like as a freelance engineer. I went around town. I went to a show every night, tried to pinpoint specific songwriters that were also new to town that didn't have a network yet that I could maybe align with and help and try to just get people in front of a mic. I set up a little makeshift studio in a small apartment that I had on Music Row in Nashville. And for people that aren't familiar, Music Row is the area where at that time all the major studios were. Every record label had an office there. Every publisher is there, management companies, booking agents. So it's really like the epicenter at that time was the epicenter of the music industry in Nashville. So having an address there definitely helped. even though it was a little apartment that I made look like a small studio. And I just went to work starting to find clients. And it was tough at first. I didn't have a resume, much of a background other than my education and the experience that I had on my own. But eventually I found people that were similar to me, that were new to town, that didn't have a lot of resources yet, and were looking for people to work with. So at first it was really just let's see if I could charge a small hourly rate to do some basic demos with songwriters and artists. And I started to find a couple niches within the town. One of them was in the hip hop community. Growing up in Detroit, I was around a really vibrant hip hop community. Minneapolis has a great hip hop community. I was really into DJing, so like that genre of music really appealed to me, and the story and the culture I love. So I found that there weren't any commercial studios that specialized in hip hop, and there weren't many that were really proficient in doing it, nor did they really want to, because it was usually a couple hours at a time, smaller budget, type of thing with the independent artists. And at that time, there wasn't as many like major artists really in that genre in Nashville. And so I found that there was this niche of these artists that were basically just the only studios that they were really working out of was like their friend that made some beats, and they set up a little closet with a microphone. So I connected with a few artists, and then one particular woman who was born in Nashville and really tied into the community there. And she started telling everybody about me that she knew that was in that genre, either like hip hop or R&B. And it led to me being able to have a pretty steady stream of clients coming in. And I was basically recording vocals, and then I was doing track production for artists. And so I saw this opportunity to kind of take maybe a leadership role a bit within that community in Nashville. And I started setting up. I went to a couple venues, and I found one that was new and was looking for some traffic. And I said, well, could we set up a monthly showcase with local hip hop artists? And then I went back to the clients that I was working with, and I said, hey, I found this venue, and we can put on this monthly showcase. Let's get a bunch of people together and get as many people out as we can, and start to build a little bit of a community around this, because I found a place for support. And that was a really strong lesson in finding an underserved niche within a very saturated market, and then figuring out a way to add more value to those people that you're working with by offering something beyond just like the basic service. And after that started to lead into this idea of the record shop, which is not intended to be a traditional recording studio, but a recording studio that was built around a producer's work and a production company. So I could provide those resources to artists and be of service to them in ways beyond just booking hourly studio time. And that's where the foundation of that came from. And then very quickly, my client base started to expand into singer-songwriters and into country music and gospel music and pop music. And then I built a network of content creators, videographers, photographers, graphic designers, some promoters, and specific people that specialized in certain types of looks or certain types of genres or artists. And then the artists that came to me that didn't have a team built around them yet, I could help align them with people and then kind of manage their projects. So I could be the go-between between the artist and the videographer. So the artist didn't want to have to negotiate the rate and the terms, and didn't really know what to ask for and what to expect. So
right.
I started to understand how those sides of the industry worked, and worked as a resource for them. And then we expanded into the record shop, offering those services to artists with me being able to support them. But I didn't try to just become like a halfway professional at all these different things. I found people that were experts at that, and then referred work to them. And then what I found was that they had audio needs as well. And it really helped expand our business to having not just artists as clients, but also companies as clients. And then since then, the record shops just continue to grow, and I'm always on the lookout for new ways to provide unique resources for artists beyond just the physical recording. What that allowed me to do was have more flexibility on who I worked with and what I spent my time on. So as opposed to just having to get somebody in front of a microphone like I did early on in my career, now I could be very selective with who I worked with and at what level I worked with them at. And it gave me a lot of freedom, which I loved. And so that first job that I moved here in Nashville was really the best thing that never happened, I guess, because I was able to find this path that has been very fulfilling and has allowed a lot of freedom and in my life, and has allowed me to accomplish a lot of the major goals that I've had.
Hey, I want to take a moment to tell you about Anchor. I absolutely love Anchor, and it's the easiest way to make a podcast. That's why I use it. Let me explain. It's completely free, and there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and every other podcast platform out there. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Switch to Anchor and never pay a hosting fee again. What you need to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Yeah, that's a really cool story. So I lied a little bit about talking about equipment because I read another interview that you did, and it was talking a little bit about equipment. And you talked about it here a few minutes ago about, doing what works for the artist. What's the mindset you have behind the equipment that you buy and use? Do you get the latest and greatest things out there, or is it something that, depending on the artist, their sound, their genre, do you work with them or find what works for them best?
Yeah. So my favorite piece of gear is my ears. That's the one piece of gear that I can't make a record without. So I focus on that first. I take care of my ears. I make sure that I have earplugs in. If I'm in a loud environment, I want to protect my hearing. I did a lot of ear training to really learn the fundamental frequencies of different instruments and being able to pick out different frequencies, as well as being able to hear compression and hear different effects and processing on tracks to know how to approach something and see what the impact of it would be. So that's like first and foremost what I usually say when people ask me what my favorite piece of gear is. When I get into choosing equipment, early on, I didn't have, a huge budget to be able to buy all kinds of stuff. So I focused on what was the thing that was going to be the most beneficial for the stuff I was working on at the time. And so when I first started, my first major investment into really professional equipment was a Neumann U87 microphone. And before that, I had a lower end, but very nice, Shure large diaphragm condenser mic that worked well. But I found that the sounds that I was getting out of it, that there was just not as smooth of a top end and not as much clarity as I heard on other recordings. And I knew through my experience in school that there were specific, mics that would help with that. I was also, at the time that I made that first investment, working with a lot of hip hop, R&B, and pop artists. And I knew that mic was a pretty strong go-to for a lot of artists in that genre and the sort of tonality of that. And then as I expanded equipment, I just looked at what is the next thing that's going to bring the biggest difference. And so I think my next purchase was a preamp. It was an Avalon 737 that's a combination of a preamp, a compressor, and an EQ. So it had that built in. It's also a tube driven unit. So it has that extra tube warmth that like an 87 doesn't have. And so I thought it was a good pair with it. And then I started renting equipment instead of purchasing because I didn't have enough money to buy stuff. So I would have a project and I would take a portion of the budget from that project and I would rent something that I thought would make it better. And it was kind of an experiment to see how big of a difference does this make? And then if I'm renting this enough, then is this the next thing to set aside, money for? So aside from basic living expenses and food, the rest of the income that I made was put into savings. And as I was able to, afford one thing and the next thing, I would just look at the thing that was going to be the greatest value for me. Now, these days, I have access to all kinds of different stuff and a huge mic locker with all kinds of great options. So when I'm working with an artist for the first time, let's say just for vocals, for example, I set up 5 or 6 different microphones the first time that I have them come in the studio, and I have them sing through each one of them and listen to the difference in how it's capturing their voice, listen to the timbre of their voice, and make a decision on what's going to be the best fit for that artist. And sometimes it's just the song itself. And so my process with how I use different microphones and different mic positioning and setup and EQs and compressors and stuff is very project dependent. And I don't have one setup that just always stays that way. Everything is put up specifically for each project and the sound that we're going after.
So let me ask you this. What keeps you doing what you're doing without getting burnt out?
I can't do anything else. there was never like a backup plan for me, and not out of like a conscious decision, but I just, once I found that passion and felt how exciting it was to take an idea and then create something tangible out of it that other people could hear and experience and have, and that thing would be recorded forever. That just fulfillment just lit me up. And it was the driving force behind doing that, just the impact of music and looking at how music impacted my life. And if I had the ability to make a living through impacting other people's lives with music, then that's like, for me, the greatest thing in the world. So I found what my true passion was. And then I also found over time that it was something that I had a gift for, that wasn't just something that I like enjoyed doing, for fun, but it was something that people told me I was pretty good at, and they liked the sounds that they got. And that, that really excited me. Long term, what excites me that I didn't recognize when I was younger, I saw the potential for impact, and I saw that impact as being awards and being number one songs, and like at a even like simpler level, just like hearing a song you recorded on the radio, for example. And when those things started to happen, those experiences were incredibly emotional. The first time that I heard a song that I produced on the radio, I was back home in Detroit, and I was just driving down the street by where I grew up, and the radio was just kind of quiet in the background, and I thought that like the song sounded like super familiar, and I turned it up, and like I lost it. I was crying, and just like, and I was back home, so it was just kind of like you kind of where you came from sort of thing and where you're at now, and that experience was incredible. And I don't take that for granted by any means, but at some point it starts to kind of wear off, where like it's already happened. You know what that feels like. And while it's still exciting every time, I haven't lost the excitement behind it. It's not that same like impactful, thing. And the same thing goes for, winning an award or being recognized for something that's really great in the moment, but that pure like joy and just that energy that happens from that experience only lasts for so long. And so I learned over time, and I didn't necessarily need to like train myself in this way. The only thing was just a change of perspective, because once those things start to happen, you want them to happen more because they feel really good. And it's not out of like, for me at least, it wasn't out of like a just desire to like be famous or to like get recognition or like see my name somewhere, special, but it was the impact that result was going to have. That really excited me. But still, I was driven by those milestones. And when those milestones happened, they were great, but then you wanted them to happen more often. And so I had to be able to stay sane and not get burnt out and bummed out if those things didn't happen as often as you'd like them to. I started to have to go back and put myself in a different perspective. And my best friend, Sean, who I grew up with and went to high school with, played football together. He was the best man at my wedding. He's like my perspective person. Whenever I'm feeling down, he puts it back into perspective for me to when we were in high school and when I just had this makeshift studio and had figured out what I wanted to do, for a living, but I had no idea, how to do it. And when I moved to Nashville and all the stuff, happened, and I was struggling to stay afloat and figure out what the next move was going to be, and facing a lot of adversity, and then looking back to looking forward to like, to where I'm at now and great opportunities that I've been provided. He really helps me like put that back in my perspective of like, I know how much you want to accomplish, but you have to look at what you've done and feel good about that, not lose sight of that and just float through things, but understand that you've done a lot and that people are proud of you. And with that, the first time that someone told me that they were proud of me for what I did, that really changed my perspective with things like that. Even though I felt like maybe I wasn't proud of myself yet because I hadn't accomplished everything that I wanted, I recognized like, I guess I have really done a lot, and I'm able to make a living doing what I love, and I don't ever have to feel like I go to work. I mean, that's enough in itself to be fulfilled. And so over time, I started to be able to curb that burnout phase when you feel overwhelmed or not like you're not getting where you want as quickly as you would have hoped, by focusing back on what you have done and looking forward on what you have the ability to continue to create. So when I get in that state, I just makes me want to work harder and just keep going after it, because it reminds me of where I came from and what I've been able to accomplish. And it reminds me of what I still want to accomplish. And so I don't look at it as a negative thing anymore. And that's what's really helped a lot with, with burnout, and what allows me to continue to, work 12 hours a day at a minimum, 5 or 6 days a week, and not really feel like I'm overwhelmed or tired, or, like I don't want to, come in. I just continue to be grateful for the gift that I was given, and finding my passion so early and being able to figure out how to make a living doing it.
Yeah, so let's get close to wrapping up here. I do have a couple other questions, though, and some of these are more personal, like what you're doing now. Cool. But what are some of your favorite moments or opportunities that you've had in your work? And you don't have to specifically say who, but just maybe some of the projects or something you've worked on that you're extremely happy about or proud of.
I'm really moved by really every project that I work on, and because of the result or the feedback that I get from the people that I work on it with. And when I see their excitement, it lights me up, and it makes me feel like I'm making an impact, in some way. So really, I mean, every project is a blessing in different ways, depending upon, what the impact has. I think one really like strong moment that stands out to me was, probably 4 or 5 years after moving to Nashville, and I had started working with a songwriter here in town named John Rich. He's part of a big country group called Big and Rich. And I was fortunate enough to be able to be brought on to work out of a studio that he had a lease on. And I was still I was trying to be full-time in engineering, but I wasn't making enough of a living yet. So I was supplementing by DJing at a club downtown. And it was probably like 12:30 at night. I was just DJing in the club, and I got a call from John. And when one of the client like that calls, you always answer. So picked up and said, "Hey, what's up, man? What do you need?" He said, "Hey, I'm down here in the studio. I just wrote a song with John Legend. Can you get over here and record it?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'll be there in a minute." And I didn't think twice. I just grabbed my stuff and I turned around and walked out. And I went and found the manager and said, "Hey, man, I got to roll. Somebody's got to DJ for me because I got to go and do this session." But it never crossed my mind to do anything else. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that people just walk out of work, but in that scenario, I recognized that there was nothing more important to me than this opportunity to be able to have an impact with the music that I create. And that first session that I did with them was incredible and led to a lot of other really great opportunities. And it really solidified for me that there really wasn't another option. I needed to continue to focus on how I could make this 100% a living. And it wasn't very far after that where I finally made the dive into just quitting everything else that I was doing and figuring it out one way or another. And I think shortly thereafter, I took out a lease on a small studio in town. And that moment, I guess, was a shifting point for me where I was still a little bit hung up on the security of an up and down freelance, career, and not totally trusting myself and what I could accomplish. And I had to, at one point, just sort of cut off that security blanket and dive in 100% into it. Fortunately, it worked out really well. But that was definitely a shift in my career that happened just out of that experience and recognizing that this was the most important thing to me.
So aside from recording or producing, what are you currently listening to? What kind of music?
I listen to all kinds of different music. I really look at music as being a soundtrack for different experiences in life. So I really love the crooner genre, Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and those guys. So if I'm just kind of chilling out on the patio or having a bonfire or something, I love that kind of music. If I'm working out, it's usually pretty aggressive, hip hop or rock music, that I dig. If I'm chilling out on the lake, I love listening to country music and the story love pop music in a party atmosphere, scenario where we're hanging out and some energy. So it's really just kind of based on my mood and kind of the environment that I'm in, what I listen to. I'm also have a weekly practice of listening to everything that's like top 40 across the genres that I work in. So as I'm setting up for sessions, I'm just listening through the stuff that's coming up the charts and making sure that I'm staying on top of, new production ideas and song arrangement, ideas and the stuff that's trending. And then I'm always on the lookout for new music too, and just seeking out the stuff that's the things that are kind of the buzzing stuff or on the horizon, sort of thing. So I really love all kinds of different music. I'm not really focused on one specific genre, and that same goes for the production work that I do. It spans across pretty much every genre.
Yeah. So around Nashville, what are some of your favorite places to go, whether it's for dinner, coffee, see live music?
Yeah. My studio is probably my favorite place to go. And when I'm not in the studio, I really love being like out in nature. So we have a lake right by the studio. And, so we like going out, on the lake, quite a bit. As far as like restaurants in town, there's a really great, like kind of Tex-Mex place, I guess they would call that. It's called Rose Pepper. That's in East Nashville. I really love that restaurant. It's got a great vibe and the food is awesome. But I mean, honestly, most of my time I'm in the studio or I'm out in nature somewhere. And if there's an artist playing in town, I'll go to the show, but there's not a specific venue that I'll that's necessarily frequent all the time. I'm definitely locked in the studio or just trying to find some silence and peace in nature, really.
Sean, just to end this, how can listeners find out more about you or about the record shop?
Well, we're on all the social media platforms. On Instagram, we're at the Record Shop Studios, and then the Record Shop Recording Studio on Facebook. Our website is therecordshopnashville.com. And I have a course for creatives that are looking to find a balance and intersection between their art and making a business out of it. And you can find information on that at mindmaptribe.com. And my email is on the website. And I like to mention this because I will never forget the challenges that I had when I moved here in finding mentorship and direction and guidance in my career path. So if anyone knows that they're passionate about what they want to do, but they're trying to figure out what the next step is in the path to take, feel free to send me an email. I respond to everyone and am more than happy to support and give direction in whatever way I can, because I remember how challenging that was when I get started and how many people never responded. So I've made a commitment to myself to respond to everyone and do what I can to help and give back and serve the next generation of people that are trying to make a living following their passion.
That was my discussion with Sean Giovanni from the Record Shop Nashville. I hope you enjoyed it. Sean mentioned this at the end of the episode, but to find a whole lot more out about the Record Shop, hit up their website at therecordshopnashville.com. There you'll find all the recording and multimedia services Sean offers, gear that he has in his studio, and a list of clients and artists he's also worked with, as well as a bunch of studio photos and videos. Before we get out of here, thank you for listening. I love interacting and engaging with people in the community, so drop me a line at 99percentlocalpod@gmail.com or hit me up on the website at 99percentlocalpod.com. As far as social media goes, I'm most active on Instagram, and you can find the podcast there at 99percentlocalpod. If you'd like to support this show, you can do it in a few different ways. The first is to follow this podcast on Instagram or Facebook at 99percentlocalpod. Also, wherever you listen to your podcast, please leave a review. Thirdly, share this podcast with your friends who also might want to check it out. And then lastly, consider contributing to the podcast on a one-time or ongoing basis. While in the future I plan to add some perks for regular contributors, right now it helps me make the best sounding interviews I can. And just so you know, all contributions that I receive, 10% of that goes to the Well Outreach located in Spring Hill, Tennessee.